Wash it before dawn, Alpha King Callum Hawthorne said, dropping his black royal robe onto Avery Monroe's laundry table like it was evidence from a crime scene. And whatever you think you smell on it, forget it. That was the first mistake. Nobody said that to an Omega with scent memory unless they were hiding something large enough to bite. Avery looked at the robe, then at the king standing under the flickering service lights of the Crown Pack laundry wing. It was 1:17 in the morning. Rain slapped the basement windows, and every dryer in the room had stopped at once, as if even the machines knew royalty had walked in with a problem. Callum Hawthorne looked exactly the way the news portraits wanted him to look. Tall, sharp, controlled, white shirt open at the collar, dark hair damp from the storm, gray eyes cold enough to make a room behave. But the robe told a different story. Cedar, cold rain, burned silver, and beneath all of that, a warmer scent Avery had only noticed once before, 3 weeks ago, when his wolf had passed her in the east corridor and stopped dead like it had found the front door to a home it had never been allowed to enter. Your Majesty, Avery said, keeping her voice flat, because laundry Omegas who sounded curious did not live peaceful lives. Is there a stain I should know about? His jaw moved once. Not a smile. More like a feeling trying to escape and being escorted back inside by security. Council wine. Candle smoke. Nothing unusual. From somewhere under his skin, his wolf pushed close enough that Avery felt the air tighten. Callum's hand closed around the edge of the table. Do not read into it. Avery almost laughed. Kings gave orders. Robes gave confessions. I wash fabric, sir. I don't interrogate it. Good. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. For 1 second, his control slipped. Not much. Just enough for his scent to catch on the back of her throat, careful and aching. Then it was gone. No one else touches that robe. The door shut behind him. Avery stood alone with the dryers, the rain, and the worst instruction a powerful man could give a woman with good hands and better instincts. She spread the robe across the table. The fabric was heavy, 12 pounds at least, black wool lined with silver-threaded silk, the kind of ceremonial thing that probably had its own insurance policy and made regular clothes feel unemployed. She checked the hem first. Mud, smoke, a smear of wax. Then she found the tear. 3 inches along the inner lining, too neat to be an accident, too rough to be a blade. Avery leaned closer. Tooth marks. Wolf tooth marks. That's subtle, she muttered. Very statesmanlike. She slid 2 fingers into the torn lining and pulled out a folded piece of paper, no bigger than a coffee receipt. It carried Callum's scent, but not his discipline. This scent was rawer, warmer, almost embarrassed. Avery should have put it back. She should have burned it. She should have remembered that low-ranked Omegas did not survive royal secrets. Instead, she unfolded it. The handwriting was rough, pressed too hard into the paper. One sentence stared back at her. She touched the hem of my robe today, and my wolf stopped fighting me for the first time in years. Avery forgot how to breathe. Outside the laundry window, something moved in the rain. 2 gold eyes watched from the dark. Callum's wolf sat beyond the glass, soaked, enormous, and entirely too pleased with himself. Avery did not sleep. She folded the little note into the bottom of her sewing box, then spent the next 4 hours washing a royal robe, as if soap could remove the fact that the Alpha King's wolf had delivered a confession through the lining. By sunrise, the robe looked perfect. The silver trim was bright, the wool was dry, and the tooth marks had been repaired with stitches so clean her supervisor would never notice them unless she developed a personality overnight. Avery carried it upstairs through the service hall just as the palace began waking up. Guards changed posts. Kitchen staff argued softly about coffee. Somewhere above them, the Crown Pack pretended it was a stable government instead of a building full of wolves with secrets. Callum was in the east corridor outside the council wing, speaking with Beta Nolan Pierce. His expression was calm. His posture was controlled. His scent, unfortunately for him, was not. The moment Avery stepped closer, cedar and storm smoke warmed in the air. Callum stopped mid-sentence. Nolan looked from him to Avery, then made the wise choice to become interested in a window. Your robe, Your Majesty, Avery said. She held it out with both hands. Callum took it carefully, too carefully for a man who had thrown it at her 5 hours earlier. His fingers brushed the edge of the fabric near hers, not touching skin, but close enough that something under Avery's ribs gave a sharp little pull. The mate bond did not announce itself with violins. It felt more like someone had tied a thread between her chest and his silence, then tugged once. Callum felt it too. She knew because his wolf pushed forward so fast his eyes flashed gold for half a second. Nolan cleared his throat. Well, that was subtle. Callum shot him a look. Avery lowered her gaze before anyone could see her mouth twitch. There was a tear in the lining, she said. I repaired it. Callum's grip tightened. A tear. Small. Animal-related. Nolan made a sound that was definitely not a cough. Callum looked down at the robe like it had betrayed the throne. Thank you, Miss Monroe. He said her name like he had practiced not saying it softly. Avery nodded and walked away before her good sense lost the argument. She made it 12 steps before a low whine came from around the corner. Rook sat beside a marble column in full wolf form, enormous, black as wet ink, wearing the expression of a creature who had done excellent work and expected praise. Avery stopped. No, she whispered. Rook's tail swept once across the floor. Absolutely not. He opened his mouth and dropped something at her feet. A silver robe button. Behind it was another folded note, tucked through the loop of thread. Avery closed her eyes. You are going to get me fired. Rook gave her a look that suggested employment was a small concern compared with destiny. She picked up the button before a passing guard could see it and slipped it into her apron pocket. The note smelled like Callum again, but softer this time, threaded with exhaustion. She waited until she reached the laundry wing to open it. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. The note read, She gave my robe back this morning and looked at me like I was a problem she could solve if I stopped making myself difficult. Avery stared at the words for a long moment. Then she looked toward the door, where Rook was sitting halfway in the hall, pretending a 700-pound royal wolf could be casual. Your king has terrible handwriting when he is emotionally repressed, she told him. Rook wagged once, very pleased. Avery folded the note and hid it with the first. That was when she noticed Marla, the senior maid, standing by the linen shelves with a stack of towels in her arms and a look sharp enough to cut thread. Marla's eyes dropped to Avery's pocket, then to Rook, then back to Avery's face. Interesting, she said. Avery felt the morning turn colder. Marla smiled without warmth. Council Speaker Greer likes to know when the lower staff becomes interesting. By noon, Avery Monroe had learned that a palace rumor moved faster than a wolf on open ground and did twice as much damage before lunch. She was in the laundry wing sorting ceremonial linens when Marla came back with 2 guards and the expression of a woman delivering bad news she had polished first. Council Speaker Greer wants every garment touched by you listed and inspected, Marla said, especially anything belonging to His Majesty. Avery kept folding a white tablecloth because her hands understood survival better than her pride did. That sounds like a thrilling use of government. One guard looked down to hide a smile. Marla did not. Careful, Avery. Low-ranked Omegas do not get charming in front of council attention. Avery placed the folded cloth on the stack. Low-ranked Omegas also do not misplace royal buttons. Yet here we all are. The guards missed it. Marla did not, and her smile thinned. 2 hours later, Avery was ordered upstairs to assist with the fitting of Callum Hawthorne's formal courtship robe. That was how she found out the Crown Pack had decided its king needed a mate before the Northern Summit, preferably one with a family name, a clean bloodline record, and no history of standing in basement laundry rooms with royal wolves. Lady Celeste Marrow waited in the mirror hall, dressed in pale cream, her blonde hair pinned so perfectly it looked personally supervised by tradition. She was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful, polished until no fingerprint of real feeling remained. Council Speaker Malcolm Greer stood beside her with his silver cane and satisfied eyes. A stable throne requires a suitable Luna, he said as Avery entered. The pack needs certainty. Callum stood on the fitting platform in a black shirt and dark trousers, still as stone while tailors moved around him. His gaze found Avery in the mirror. For 1 second, the room lost its edges. The mate bond pulled, quiet and painful, like a song heard through a wall. Then Callum looked away first. That should not have hurt. It did anyway. Miss Monroe will handle the inner lining, Greer said. She has experience with His Majesty's robes, apparently. The word apparently landed like a slap wrapped in silk. Avery stepped forward, needle case in hand. Of course, Council Speaker. Callum's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Celeste lifted the ceremonial robe from its stand and moved behind him. "May I?" she asked softly. Callum nodded. The moment her fingers touched the collar, the air changed. Rook surged beneath Callum's skin so hard the mirrors trembled in their frames. The scent of cedar cracked open into storm and warning. Celeste went pale and took one step back. A tailor dropped 3 pins. Greer's eyes sharpened. "Your Majesty?" Callum forced his breathing steady. "Continue." But Avery could feel the lie in the room. Rook did not object to the robe. He objected to the story being built around it. Avery lowered her eyes and reached for the sleeve. Her fingers found a new tear near the cuff, hidden beneath embroidery. Tooth marks again. Smaller this time, hurried. She slipped the folded paper free before anyone saw. The note burned in her palm all through the fitting. When she finally reached the service corridor, she opened it beside a cart of folded towels. "If duty demands I stand beside another woman, then let my wolf hate me. It will still be kinder than letting the council destroy her." Avery read the sentence twice. The first time, it broke her heart. The second time, it made her angry. He had decided she was too fragile for the truth, too low for the fight, too inconvenient for the throne. She turned, and Callum was standing at the end of the corridor, his face pale with recognition. His eyes dropped to the paper in her hand. For once, the Alpha King had no command ready. Avery folded the note slowly. "Your wolf is honest," she said. "That must be lonely for both of you." Callum looked at the note in Avery's hand as if it had learned to speak in front of the wrong people. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. The service corridor smelled like warm towels, rainwater tracked in from the east doors, and a truth neither one of them had permission to say out loud. "Give it to me," Callum said. His voice was low, controlled, and entirely ruined by the way his scent shook at the edges. Avery held the paper a little tighter. "Is that an order from my Alpha King or a panic response from a man whose wolf has better communication skills?" His eyes flashed gold. Not anger. Not exactly. Rook was close enough to make the lights buzz overhead. "You do not understand what those letters could do." Avery gave him a tired smile. "That is funny. I was starting to think they could tell the truth." Callum stepped closer, then stopped himself with visible effort. "The council is watching you now. Greer will turn every word into a weapon. Then maybe stop giving him silence to work with." The words landed hard. Callum looked away first, which was impressive for a king and embarrassing for a man. A king does not write letters he cannot send. Avery folded the note along its original crease. "Then your wolf is braver than you." For a moment, the hallway went so quiet Avery could hear a cart will squeak 2 floors below. Callum's face did not change much, but something behind it did. A door opening, a wall cracking. Then footsteps clicked at the far end of the corridor, and the moment vanished. Marla appeared with 2 council aides behind her. Her eyes went straight to Avery's hand. "Miss Monroe," she said, sweet as spoiled milk. "Council Speaker Greer requests your presence." By sunset, the palace had become a machine built to grind her name into rumor. Avery was taken to a small council room off the mirror hall, not a prison, not anything dramatic, just a polished place where powerful people could ruin someone without raising their voices. Greer sat at the head of the table with a folder in front of him. Callum stood near the window, his shoulders rigid, his face carved out of duty. Nolan Pierce was there too, looking like he wanted to bite through protocol and was trying very hard not to. Greer opened the folder. "We found this in your sewing box." He slid a paper across the table. Avery did not touch it at first. The scent hit her before her fingers did. Peppermint oil. Smoke resin. Someone had tried to bury the original trail under sharp, clean smells. Amateur work, but expensive amateur work. She read the lines. They claimed she had used scent binding to draw Rook toward her, to weaken Callum's control, to make the Alpha King dependent on a laundry omega. The room blurred for half a second, not because she was afraid, but because she understood the shape of the trap. "I did not write this," Avery said. Greer folded his hands. "Convenient." "No," Avery said. "Factual." Callum's head turned. A flicker of pride crossed his scent before he buried it. Greer leaned back. "Your Majesty, the summit is in 6 days. The Crown Pact cannot afford whispers that its king is being influenced by a servant with questionable gifts." Nolan muttered. "Careful." Greer ignored him. "Until this matter is resolved, Miss Monroe must be removed from royal service." Avery looked at Callum. She waited. Not for a rescue. For courage. Callum's throat moved once. His eyes held hers, full of storm and apology that had not earned the right to exist yet. Then he said, "Miss Monroe will leave the palace tonight until the investigation is complete." The words were calm. That made them worse. Avery stood slowly. Her chair did not scrape. She would not give them even that. She placed the forged letter back on the table and pushed it toward Greer with 2 fingers. "You should have folded it the other way," she said. "I am right-handed." Greer's smile froze. Avery turned to Callum and handed him the real note. "Your Majesty," she said, because titles were sometimes the only distance left to a person. Then she walked out. Behind her, deep inside the palace, Rook howled so hard every window in the council room trembled. Avery left the Crown Palace with 1 canvas bag, 2 clean uniforms, and the kind of silence people mistake for guilt when they have already decided they need a villain. No one dragged her out. No one shouted. That would have made the cruelty too honest. Instead, Marla handed her final pay in a white envelope. 2 guards walked 6 feet behind her, and every servant in the West Hall suddenly became fascinated by the floor. Avery kept her chin level. Low-ranked Omegas learned early that crying in public gave powerful people a souvenir. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sidewalks still shone under the palace lights. The Omega housing district sat 3 miles downhill from the Crown grounds, past the old train bridge and the grocery store where Pack families pretended not to notice when palace staff bought marked-down bread. Avery had lived there before. The room smelled like boiled coffee, laundry soap, and people trying to survive quietly. Mrs. Vale from apartment 3 opened her door when Avery came in. "You need dinner?" Avery shook her head. "I need everyone to stop looking at me like I exploded." Mrs. Vale considered that. People do love an explosion when it is not their kitchen. Avery almost smiled. Almost. By morning, the rumor had grown teeth. She had bewitched the Alpha King. She had tricked his wolf. She had hidden spells in his robe. By lunch, someone claimed she had been trained by a rogue-sent circle in Montana, which would have been more impressive if Avery had ever been west of Ohio. She did not answer any of it. If she fought too loudly, Greer would use her as proof that Callum had let a servant destabilize the Crown Pack. So Avery did the thing no one would thank her for. She stayed quiet to keep the summit from breaking. Up at the palace, Callum discovered that silence was not peace. Rook refused to shift, refused breakfast, refused the council chamber. When Callum reached for a clean robe, his wolf slammed so hard against his ribs that he had to grip the bedpost and breathe through it like pain had learned his name. Only one robe did not make Rook snarl. The black one Avery had repaired. Callum found himself standing in the middle of his room with that robe in his hands, breathing in the faint trace of rosemary soap and warm cotton she had left in the lining. It was pathetic. It was also the first honest thing he had done all day. Nolan Pierce watched from the doorway for 10 long seconds before saying, "You know, most kings make one terrible decision before breakfast. You managed to ruin a woman before sunset." Callum did not look up. "Choose your next words carefully." "I did. You did not protect her. You protected your throne from the cost of choosing her." The sentence hit harder because it was clean. No insult. No drama. Just truth with its sleeves rolled up. Callum opened the packet of notes on his desk. The real one smelled like him, like Rook, like cedar under rain. The forged one smelled wrong. Peppermint oil. Smoke resin. Expensive paper. The fold turned left first. Callum went still. "Greer is left-handed," he said. Nolan stepped closer. "So is half the palace. Greer also uses smoke resin in his private study." Callum lifted the forged letter, and beneath the sharp cover scents, he found one thin thread Avery had noticed before anyone else. Fear. Not Avery's. Someone else had helped plan it and had been afraid while doing it. That night, Callum went alone to the laundry wing. The room was dark, machines silent, tables scrubbed clean. Her station had already been emptied. No sewing box. No rosemary soap. No gray cardigan on the chair. He found one silver thread caught beneath the edge of the table, so small anyone else would have missed it. When he touched it, the scent memory opened like a bruise. Avery standing in the council room. Avery knowing he had failed her. Avery still worrying that if he fell, the whole pack would pay for it. Callum closed his fist around the thread. Rook finally moved inside him, not angry this time. Grieving. "I know." Callum whispered into the empty laundry room. "I know what I did. 2 days before the Northern Summit. The coronation robe failed its first inspection. Not loudly, not dramatically. It simply split along the inner collar while hanging in the ceremonial chamber, as if 5 generations of Crown Pack authority had decided to give up in front of 3 horrified tailors and 1 very tired beta. Nolan Pierce stared at the broken silver seam for a full 10 seconds. "Well," he said, "that is either sabotage or the robe has developed political opinions." The head tailor looked ready to faint into the velvet carpet. "No one can repair this before the summit. The original stitch pattern is locked under Wolfline protocol. The only person who handled it recently was Miss Monroe." Across the room, Malcolm Greer leaned on his silver cane with the calm face of a man watching a trap close exactly on schedule. "Convenient," he said. Callum stood behind the robe, silent. His eyes were gray, but Rook moved under them like gold beneath ice. The split was small, maybe 4 inches, but it ran through the oath band, the hidden seam every Alpha King touched when swearing to protect the pack. If the robe failed in public, Greer could argue the wolf line no longer recognized Callum's leadership. No raised voices, no blood, just ceremony, law, and a room full of powerful men pretending a torn collar was destiny. That afternoon, Nolan went downhill to the Omega housing district alone. Avery opened her apartment door with a mug of coffee in one hand and the expression of a woman who had already survived the worst part of the conversation. "If you are here to tell me the king feels bad, I have dishes that need more emotional support." Nolan sighed. "The robe is damaged." Avery's face changed, not softening, not forgiving, just sharpening. "Damaged how?" "Oath seam. Inner collar. Summit in 48 hours." She looked past him toward the street, where palace cars looked expensive enough to apologize badly. "That seam does not break by accident." "I know." "Does he?" Nolan hesitated. Avery gave a small laugh, without humor. "Great. Progress." She should have closed the door. Instead, she grabbed her sewing kit, a gray coat, and the last of her dignity, which was currently tired but still available. She entered the palace through the service door, not the marble front hall. No announcement, no apology parade, just fluorescent lights, cleaning carts, and the smell of floor polish over old secrets. Callum waited in the ceremonial chamber. When he saw her, the mate bond pulled so hard Avery nearly stopped walking. He did stop. That was worse. "Miss Monroe," he said. "Your Majesty," she answered, because forgiveness had not been issued with her visitor badge. She went straight to the robe. The moment her fingers touched the collar, the scent memory opened. Smoke resin, peppermint oil, Greer. Underneath that, a floral trace from Lady Celeste Marrow. And beneath both, fear, thin and bright as a wire. Avery frowned. Celeste touched this. Callum's voice went colder. She helped him. Maybe. Or maybe someone put her hand on the knife and called it loyalty. She worked for an hour without looking at him. The stitch pattern was old, stubborn, and unnecessarily dramatic, much like monarchy in general. Rook appeared halfway through, silent and enormous, and laid his head on the edge of the table. Avery glanced at him. "No notes today?" Rook pushed a folded paper from under his paw. Of course he did. Avery did not open it. She slid it into the inner lining, directly above where Callum's heart would rest beneath the robe. Callum watched her. "What is that?" "Your truth," she said, pulling the final thread tight. "You can carry it yourself for once." The Northern Summit began at 9 in the morning, which Avery considered rude because political disasters should at least wait until people had finished coffee. The Great Hall had been polished until it reflected every expensive shoe, every old family ring, and every face pretending not to stare at the Omega from the laundry wing standing near the side entrance with a sewing kit in her hands. Callum Hawthorne stood on the oath platform in the repaired robe, black wool falling clean over his shoulders, silver thread bright against the morning light. He looked like a king again. Unfortunately, Avery knew exactly how much thread, fear, and unfinished truth were holding that image together. Around him sat the visiting Northern Alphas, the Crown Pack elders, Lady Celeste Marrow in pale cream, and Council Speaker Malcolm Greer, who looked relaxed enough to make Avery want to check every chair for poison, metaphorically speaking. Nolan stood 2 steps behind Callum, his expression calm in the way betas looked calm when they had already planned for exits and disliked all of them. The oath ceremony had barely started when Greer rose. "Before His Majesty renews the crown vow, The council must address a matter of contamination. The hall went still. Avery felt the word land on her skin before anyone looked at her. Contamination was a neat word. Clean. Official. It let people avoid saying servant, omega, inconvenient woman. Greer lifted a folder. Evidence has been found suggesting that Miss Avery Monroe used scent binding to interfere with the Alpha King's wolf and compromise his judgment before the summit. Murmurs rolled through the hall. Callum's scent went cold with fury, but he did not move. Rook did. Avery felt the wolf rise beneath the robe like thunder under a locked door. Greer turned toward her. Miss Monroe, step forward. Avery walked to the center of the hall. Her shoes sounded very small on the marble, which annoyed her, so she made the next steps louder. If they wanted a guilty omega, they could at least get one with decent posture. Greer held out the forged letter. Do you deny writing this? Yes. Do you deny hiding private correspondence inside royal garments? Avery glanced at Callum. I deny being the only person in this room with poor boundaries. Nolan made a strangled sound behind the platform. Several visiting alphas suddenly studied their programs. Greer's face tightened. This is not a comedy, Miss Monroe. No, Avery said. It is a frame job with expensive paper. The room shifted. Greer blinked once, too slowly. Avery held out her hand. May I inspect the evidence you claim proves I am dangerous? He hesitated just long enough for everyone important to notice. Then he gave her the letter. Avery did not rush. She turned it over. Smelled the edge. Checked the fold. Peppermint oil. Smoke resin. Left first crease. My sewing box is cedar, rosemary soap, and cheap thread because the palace does not believe lower staff deserve good supplies. A few servants near the wall looked down, hiding smiles they had earned. Avery lifted the paper. This letter also carries scent from the council robe chamber. I have never been permitted inside that room. Greer smiled thinly. You expect the summit to take the word of a laundry omega over a council speaker? Callum stepped down from the platform. The movement was quiet, but the hall remembered who he was. Avery braced for him to take over. He did not. He stopped beside her and removed the robe from his shoulders, turning the inner lining toward the room. No, he said. You will take mine. He pulled the folded letter from the seam over his heart. Avery had not opened it. Now he did. His voice carried through every corner of the hall. I let duty teach me cowardice. My wolf knew my mate. I knew her too. The betrayal was not that she touched my robe. It was that I let my counsel touch her name. Silence broke open. Rook shifted beside him in a rush of gold-eyed power, then lowered his massive head in front of Avery. Not to the throne. Not to the elders. To her. Lady Celeste stood with tears bright in her eyes and fear still in her scent. Council Speaker Greer told me where to place the forged letter, she said. Greer's cane struck the floor once. For the first time all morning, he looked less like law and more like a man running out of doors. The Northern Summit began at 9 in the morning, which Avery considered rude because political disasters should at least wait until people had finished coffee. The Great Hall had been polished until it reflected every expensive shoe, every old family ring, and every face pretending not to stare at the Omega from the laundry wing standing near the side entrance with a sewing kit in her hands. Callum Hawthorne stood on the oath platform in the repaired robe, black wool falling clean over his shoulders, silver thread bright against the morning light. He looked like a king again. Unfortunately, Avery knew exactly how much thread, fear, and unfinished truth were holding that image together. Around him sat the visiting Northern Alphas, the Crown Pack Elders, Lady Celeste Marrow in pale cream, and Council Speaker Malcolm Greer, who looked relaxed enough to make Avery want to check every chair for poison, metaphorically speaking. Nolan stood 2 steps behind Callum, his expression calm in the way betas looked calm when they had already planned for exits and disliked all of them. The oath ceremony had barely started when Greer rose. Before His Majesty renews the crown vow, the council must address a matter of contamination. The hall went still. Avery felt the word land on her skin before anyone looked at her. Contamination was a neat word. Clean. Official. It let people avoid saying servant, omega, inconvenient woman. Greer lifted a folder. Evidence has been found suggesting that Miss Avery Monroe used scent binding to interfere with the Alpha King's wolf and compromise his judgment before the summit. Murmurs rolled through the hall. Callum's scent went cold with fury, but he did not move. Rook did. Avery felt the wolf rise beneath the robe like thunder under a locked door. Greer turned toward her. Miss Monroe, step forward. Avery walked to the center of the hall. Her shoes sounded very small on the marble, which annoyed her, so she made the next steps louder. If they wanted a guilty Omega, they could at least get one with decent posture. Greer held out the forged letter. Do you deny writing this? Yes. Do you deny hiding private correspondence inside royal garments? Avery glanced at Callum. I deny being the only person in this room with poor boundaries. Nolan made a strangled sound behind the platform. Several visiting alphas suddenly studied their programs. Greer's face tightened. This is not a comedy, Miss Monroe. No, Avery said. It is a frame job with expensive paper. The room shifted. Greer blinked once, too slowly. Avery held out her hand. May I inspect the evidence you claim proves I am dangerous? He hesitated just long enough for everyone important to notice. Then he gave her the letter. Avery did not rush. She turned it over, smelled the edge, checked the fold. Peppermint oil, smoke resin, left first crease. My sewing box is cedar, rosemary soap, and cheap thread because the palace does not believe lower staff deserve good supplies. A few servants near the wall looked down, hiding smiles they had earned. Avery lifted the paper. This letter also carries scent from the council robe chamber. I have never been permitted inside that room. Greer smiled thinly. You expect the summit to take the word of a laundry Omega over a council speaker? Callum stepped down from the platform. The movement was quiet, but the hall remembered who he was. Avery braced for him to take over. He did not. He stopped beside her and removed the robe from his shoulders, turning the inner lining toward the room. No, he said. You will take mine. He pulled the folded letter from the seam over his heart. Avery had not opened it. Now he did. His voice carried through every corner of the hall. I let duty teach me cowardice. My wolf knew my mate. I knew her too. The betrayal was not that she touched my robe. It was that I let my counsel touch her name. Silence broke open. Rook shifted beside him in a rush of gold-eyed power, then lowered his massive head in front of Avery. Not to the throne, not to the elders, to her. Lady Celeste stood with tears bright in her eyes and fear still in her scent. Council Speaker Greer told me where to place the forged letter, she said. Greer's cane struck the floor once. For the first time all morning, he looked less like law and more like a man running out of doors. 3 weeks after the summit, the Crown Palace laundry wing sounded normal again, which was how Avery knew life had changed. The machines hummed. The steam pipes complained. Someone in the hallway argued that decaf coffee was a personal betrayal. But the old fear had thinned out of the walls. Malcolm Greer was gone from the council chamber, stripped of his seat, and sent north to manage border records, which Avery privately considered a punishment suited to his soul. Lady Celeste had testified in full, paid back her family debts through public service, and sent Avery one apology note written on paper, so expensive Avery used it as a bookmark out of principle. The bigger change came slower. Callum reopened every hearing Greer had silenced. Omega testimony could no longer be dismissed because of rank. Staff wages went up. Service doors were repaired before marble fountains. It was not a fairy tale. It was policy, which Avery trusted more. On the morning of the Crown Pack renewal oath, she stood at her old work table, repairing the last silver thread in Callum's robe. Her name had been cleared from the scent-binding records. Her mother's name, too. That part had made her sit down for a while. Some justice arrived like thunder. Some arrived as ink drying on a corrected file. Callum came down before dawn without guards, without Nolan, without the careful distance of a king hiding behind his own importance. Rook walked beside him in wolf form, carrying himself with the dignity of a royal beast who had absolutely stolen 2 breakfast sausages from the kitchen. Avery glanced at the wolf. I can smell the sausage. Rook looked offended by evidence. Callum almost smiled. He was getting better at that. Not perfect. Better. The oath begins in an hour, Avery said, smoothing the robe. You should be upstairs letting people panic around you. They can panic without me. That is leadership? Delegation. She looked at him then, really looked. The mate bond was still there, steady as a hand resting near hers without taking more than it was given. Callum reached into the robe pocket and pulled out a folded letter. For once, it was not hidden in a seam, not shoved under a wolf paw, not smuggled through royal laundry like a crime with feelings. He held it out. This one is from me. Avery took it, but did not open it right away. You know I may say no to whatever this is. I know. You know being my mate does not mean you get to make choices for me. I know that better than I knew it before. That answer mattered. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was responsible. Avery opened the letter. It held one line, written in Callum's careful hand. I do not ask you to stand beside my throne. I ask whether I may become worthy of standing beside you. For a moment, the laundry wing was quiet except for the old pipes and the soft sound of rain starting outside. Avery thought about loyalty and how often people confused it with obedience. She thought about power and how it only became honorable when it learned to listen. She thought about love, not as a crown, not as a claim, but as the daily work of telling the truth before someone else had to bleed dignity from silence. She folded the letter and placed it in her own pocket. Eventually, she said. Callum breathed out like the whole palace had released him. Rook sneezed, then dragged a second note from beneath the robe with his teeth. Avery narrowed her eyes. Rook. Callum closed his eyes. Please tell me he did not. Avery opened it. The handwriting was terrible. He is improving. Also, say yes before he writes another speech. Avery laughed then, not quietly, not politely, but freely enough that two maids passing the door stopped and smiled. Callum looked at her like the sound was worth more than the oath upstairs. When he walked into the great hall an hour later, he wore the robe she had repaired and the truth he had finally earned. And when the crown pack bowed, Avery did not lower her eyes because she was less. She lowered them only for a breath, then looked up again, exactly as herself.